Hi. Thank you so much for your connections that you've made. They were very much appreciated. I'm so delighted. So the surrogate that was planned to take place, it kind of didn't really work out. It wasn't the way to go. So I'm continuing it in this way. So, but without the offer, I would not have even started that, so I'm very grateful. So today, with all that has happened, I actually need to take it away and digest it myself before getting to what that core is that I want to share with you. So I will be going home, sleeping on it, and then sharing with you what it is. So I'm hoping to keep these videos between 10-15 minutes, no more than that, and to share what the core was, and then the essences that actually test up that are relevant to you out there and to myself. I'll read them so that you can take from that what suits or what doesn't, or insights that you may gain from that. So that's the plan. So what showed up in the sessions was a really good follow-on from that completion and going into life with the board that one way or another is paradox. We need to see both sides of what a word is and claim both of them, because otherwise the power isn't there. So what showed up today was a pattern that was pretty much in all of them. So there certainly is a nutshell. And what it was is a process of something starting and then continuing and continuing and continuing and continuing and continuing, because there is no beginning, there is no end. So we pop in and we continue, and then we continue and continue. But what was relevant with this pattern that showed up was very much a process where beings were looped in with another person's going on and on and on, demanding more and more. And although the being wanted to appease and wanted to put everything right, there is no putting it right. There's just, no matter what you do, there's more, 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 more. So there's a process where they could have stopped here and sorted out whatever that is. So it could be, I really can't work overtime for 3 hours because there's no end to the demands that you have of me, and I want to please you and I want to be appreciated, but I really want to go home. I have children at home, I have a partner at home. And some of these patterns actually are within ourselves, where there are patterns that drive us from within, that stop us from being able to find that place where we can stop. And when we can stop, we can actually start to play. So again, there's a paradox in this process. And it's this process where this goes forward, and this here needs to meet it to be able to see the full process and to discuss it and get clear about this I cannot do going forward. Now, that doesn't mean that the other being has to agree. We are each holding our own opinion for what it is we are doing in our life and what we're creating and how we want to enjoy it. So I cannot have my opinion if I don't give you your opinion. It's an opinion. They're allowed to have an opinion. So one of the women that I was seeing, in fact have been seeing for decades, she'd come to this completion point. She had found that spot. And she came in and was actually beating herself up. And the reason she was beating herself up, because the inner aspect of herself felt cross that she has spent decades and only now had found this place. So it's amazing she found the place at all. We're all working at finding that place one way or another. So I said to her, this can take lifetimes to actually get that. So the fact that you've reached it is just wonderful, not something to beat yourself up for because you didn't get there earlier. So we thought, well, let's see how long this has taken you to actually be in this spot. And in testing it up, what came back was not a time frame as much as the statement, I've never left heaven. So that opened up an incredible aspect of understanding we have access to all aspects. We are inside of it. It is inside of us. It is not outside of there. I get the feeling that when we go out, we go into those spheres that we are inside of. And that which we spoke about last time, which that spark that gets aboard to ride, it's like we decide to take off. We decide to take that spark that is gifted to us in the freedom to say, okay, off you go. And then when we do, we end up saying we feel alienated when we were the ones who moved away for the experience. And we have the free will to do that. And therefore, everyone has the free will to create their own, to experience their own, to have their own opinion. But then it's also important for those who are pleasers and want to please and want to be part of making it all okay, to be very clear where it is okay for them also. So that's really what showed up this weekend. And it's about knowing when to stop pleasing, to be able to walk with an aspect that can hold its own and become kind of Teflon coated, so that that feeling of pushing and it's never enough and you need to do more and this has to be done, you've got to understand that. Well, that's their story. It's not necessarily what's going on, unless that is something you are both playing in. There are times when we've all stood in incredible situations and they are exciting and they're remarkable and we want to keep going, and there's a team play in it where we give our best and we give because we want to. We meet each other in where that sits, but not when it doesn't suit and it continues and it continues and it's still not enough and it continues. Something has to say, this is enough. This is about, I'm losing the play of it. I'm losing the teamship in it. I feel I'm driven rather than coming from my own wanting to. So that's kind of what showed up. And interestingly enough, as I just mentioned before, it can come from within as well, where we're taken over by something that runs us. And to be able to work that out is sometimes not that easy, but when you find it, something relaxes, and again, you can make that normal. Yeah? And again, it's a paradox, because often what shows up is not particularly nice, but that's an aspect of us that if we embrace the shadow of it, makes us very powerful and capable and at peace, knowing that we're the whole of it, not just one particular how we prefer to see ourselves. So that's kind of what showed up. So now I'll share with you the three essences that came up in the hope that you can relate to it as they associate themselves with what did reveal itself. And I uploaded it to my phone because when I looked at it earlier on, it stopped recording. So here we are again. So the first essence that showed up was a bark flower called water violet. And I'll read it to you. So water violet is the remedy for those talented, capable people whose independence and self-reliance can make them seem proud and disdainful. True water violet people tend to be upright, quiet, and dignified. And I think they're the ones who actually find that they can say stop. They prefer their own company or that of a few close friends. We need the remedy when our natural reserve has built a barrier between us and others, leaving us lonely and unable to make contact with those around. Water violet helps bring us back into balance so that we can become more involved with humanity. So Bach's description of this is, for those who in health or illness like to be alone, very quiet people who move about without noise, speak little and gently, very independent, capable and self-reliant, almost free of the opinions of others. They are aloof, leave people alone and go their own way. Often clever and talented, their peace and calmness is a blessing to those around them. So that's rather beautiful. The other essence that came up was, let me find it, it was white chestnut, also a Bach flower. And this one, I'll read to you. Okay. So it says, white chestnut is the remedy for unwanted thoughts and mental arguments that intrude into the mind and stop us concentrating. White chestnut thoughts are often described as worrying, but they are not necessarily anxious or fearful, more repetitive. They worry us like a dog worries a bone. White chestnut's thoughts go nowhere. They circle around and around in the head, and they just loop and loop and loop. And very often what happens, as described here, it loops and loops and loops, thinking you can sort out that looping when all it does is loop and loop, where in fact finding a decision and getting clear is what stops that looping. And in that way, we can arrive at that which does feel like heaven when these things stop. And we often go, oh my God, I'm so glad that's over. I feel like I'm in heaven, because it's there all the time. We're the ones who remove ourselves from it. So the remedy helps us to think straight. We can deal calmly and rationally with any underlying problem that might be causing the distress we're in. So Bach's description is, for those who cannot prevent thoughts, ideas, arguments which they do not desire from entering their minds, usually at such times when the interest of the moment is not strong enough to keep the mind full. Thoughts which worry and will remain, or if for a time thrown out, will return. They seem to circle around and round, cause mental torture. The presence of such unpleasant thoughts drives out peace and interferes with being able to think only of the work or pleasure of the day. So there was one more essence, which was jacaranda. And jacaranda is very much to do with thoughts being scattered and not being able to come to anything because the looping prevents it. So it's about that ability to go calm, be clear, decisive, and feel the peace in that. So hopefully you can find a place that this may or hopefully may not apply, but we do these things, and when we find we can stop them, whether it is with outside work, with inside work, the peace is there for all of us. So thanks again, and it's a pleasure to do these, and I'll catch you again next week. Lots of love. Bye.